Hello, welcome to the February 24th, 2026 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can submit questions in advance by going to Club Cubase, by sending an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or simply asking in the live chat field. When asking questions, if you could indicate a couple of things that are helpful. One is what version of Cubase that you're running. So if it's Cubase 13, 14, 15, what level, if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, and which operating system. That information is helpful. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer questions in a real-time manner may soon be eclipsed with the number of questions that come up. But I'll try my best to get through all the questions, and we'll go through them chronologically as asked. So if you don't see an immediate response to your question, if we could avoid asking the same questions repeatedly, that would be appreciated. We should have an index of all of the topics that are covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field with timestamps, so you could quickly navigate and search for topics. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com. And we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that wonderful site. We also want to give special thanks to two people that serve as moderators, Jazz Dude and Agent K. They're not Steinberg employees. They do this to make it a better community experience, and we appreciate their efforts. And we'll give it an extra appreciation of gratitude for Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource of information for the Steinberg community, different links to tutorials, downloads, and other files that are relevant for the Steinberg community. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, and I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host today. I'm presenting from just outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia, and if you are watching the live stream live, please introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. All right. So we see Stefan Larsson joining from Sweden, with Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo. We see Jan from Stockholm is Cubase Index, just sending everyone greetings. We have Randy Lee Music from Texas. We have Taylor from Music for World Peace Records. All right. From Pine Grove, Pennsylvania, we have VS Terra Nova joining from Amsterdam. All right, Music for World Peace Records says, will the current version of SpectraLayers Pro work in Cubase 12? So I believe that it will. So if I wanted to, so it's going to use, when you have the ARA, I believe it's going to use whatever the ARA extension would just simply go to the latest version of SpectraLayers, so they don't have to necessarily be in sync. It's just whatever the latest version. I don't think you'll have any problems. I haven't tested it, but I wouldn't anticipate any problems with that. All right, wonderful to see Craig Sibley on. It just says, hi Greg, glad to be here, thank you. So I looked for your email you mentioned that you sent on the last live stream. I didn't see it. So if you want to resend that, Craig, if you get a chance, if you need help with that, anything. All right, so we see Klaus. This is greetings from Malmo, Sweden. We see Jazz Dude on. All right, so we see from Music for World Peace Records, it says, when setting an instrument to follow the chord track, when should I use synchronize or follow directly? So let's take a quick look at, we'll make it very simple, the project here. So I'll just add a quick chord track. So let's just make this an A major chord. All right, so we have a C, F, and G chord, and I have an A major chord here. And I'm just going to duplicate this a couple times. And let's glue these together. Okay, so we have our chord track, so let's see what the difference is. Don't know off the top of my head, but we'll see if we can figure it out. So say let's follow the chords. Okay, so let's see what happens if we choose follow to synchronize track data with the chord track first. I think this may analyze the chords that are in there. But let's see what happens. Okay. Now let's try the other setting. So that's where it's synchronizing. It did an analysis of this first. Let's set it to chords. And I'll move this up. And we'll do the other one, see if there's any discernible difference between it. So it looks like the, doing the analysis kind of gave it more, this is when we did the analyze the chords, and this is when we did, so we see that some of the thirds are missing. So I would maybe choose to do the synchronize. Seems to be more accurate for that. All right, you see Craig Sibley giving thanks to Jazz Dude for all of his efforts. Okay, so user E5R3Y just says, hi everyone, I got a fast vibrato in all my leads and no idea how it got there. Is it amplitude or gremlin? So make sure, like when you're recording, like MIDI data in, something that could be causing it is make sure, like, one, that your modulation wheel isn't like up high. So let's see if we come over, let's add an instrument track. Let's get to like a retro log. And we'll come over, just do a quick. So it's probably going to be maybe a MIDI CC message that is contributing to that vibrato. So the two that I would look for, so let's say if I come here and I was recording, I would make sure that check to see, and you may notice this when you go into like a MIDI list editor. So if you go to the MIDI list editor, see if there is, look for, if we have, so we have some notes, but we see controller, so we have CC1, and then also look for aftertouch. Sometimes aftertouch may, like when you press a key down, may add vibrato to it, and sometimes some keyboards may be transmitting aftertouch without you expecting it. So when you kind of press down on a key, you may get aftertouch. So just kind of get an idea of what's going on. So if we go to the MIDI insert and let's choose like the MIDI monitor, you could check from your controller. So right now I have a note on, note off message. But if I just do aftertouch, we can see that this message can just send lots and lots of data. Or if I have my modulation wheel. So look in the part, and the best way to kind of discover that, if it's in an existing part, is just to go to the MIDI list editor. We can think of this as maybe more of a microscope, and we can say, okay, I'm noticing that it's aftertouch that's doing it. What we could do now is you could enable the filters, and then we could say I want to focus on event type, and we can see now I select one aftertouch. It's going to select all the aftertouch messages will be there. I could hit Control or Command A plus delete, and then we'll choose not to have a focus filter, and then we can see that there's no aftertouch messages. But look in the MIDI list editor, and that would probably point out what is the culprit for you. All right, Craig Sibley just asked, does Cubase come with any mastering plugins, or is that available with extra purchase or third-party software? So yeah, there's lots of mastering plugins that are available with Cubase. So if you wanted to, check out definitely like the frequency EQ would be kind of a surgical EQ that people would use in mastering scenarios. If you wanted to do multi-band compression, you could also check out like if you're doing more kind of electronic music, you could come over here to Squasher. You can also have in the dynamics area, if you wanted to go to Razor, there's also, which is kind of a really high quality limiter, and you could come over here and different algorithms for that. Also, just going into, if you wanted to look at for kind of more mastering, also you could check out the Imager plugin. which could be used to, apply stereo imaging on particular frequency ranges. So lots of plugins that could be used for high quality mastering that's built into Cubase. We do have a separate mastering program called WaveLab. All those plugins are in WaveLab as well. All right, great to see Flyv checking in from Winnipeg. All right, so we have Deerface checking in from Sweden. All right, you see Craig Sibley's on 15 Pro with a Mac Tahoe. All right, Calote is saying hello and happy Fire Horse New Year. All right, so we have Jason Sykes joining from South Yorkshire, England. See Brian DeBear joining from Yuma, Arizona. All right, Rob Schmedeke just says, hi Greg, I've copied a vocal track and I want to make sure there's not a phase issue with the copy tracks. What is the best way to see or check for phase issues on 2 or more identical tracks? The easy way is, you could actually just look at the waveforms. So if we're here, and let's say I duplicate this track. All right, I'll move these 2 tracks to the top. And, just kind of zoom in. And you could see kind of the direction of the amplitude on the waveform. So if they were out of phase, if I just came here and I knocked this particular track, if I invert it to polarity, we would see where this waveform is going up, this one goes down. So that as we would play that, that would cancel out. So you could just visually align at and just look at the 2 tracks and see if they are going to be in phase, just looking at the waveforms of the 2 tracks. So let me know if that's helpful, Rob. All right, so we have Scott Hirema joining from Denver, Colorado. Thanks for joining us. And we have Calote, it says hello from Portugal. So I hope you're well. My family and I were thinking of going on vacation in Portugal, but we saw all the flooding. So let me know if Portugal is recovered from the floods, if it's safe to go on vacation there, or if it seems like it was pretty devastating floods. Just curious. All right, we have Base to Heaven from Houston, Texas joining. Thanks for being online, being part of the community today. My brother lives in Houston. All right, and we have Benny joining from Sweden. We have John Barry joining from a sunny English Riviera. All right, so we see John's question is the new Groove Agent 6 and Groove Agent 6 SE. How do you name pads? Many thanks. All right, let's take a look. So let me just see if I could just drop a sample on here. All right, so if you just kind of right click on the pad itself, and you may have to have a sample on it, or no, you could just come right here, right click on the pad, and we'll call it John Barry. So again, just right click, rename pad. and that should do it. So. All right, wonderful to see Soren checking in from Sweden. We have Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo. Thanks for being part of the community today. See, George says, hi, Greg. Says, your voice sounds like you have a bad cold. Get well soon. So, yeah, my voice sounds bad, but I'm feeling much better. Over the weekend, I was, had a bad cold, but it's just in my voice that hasn't fully recovered. But I'm feeling very normal today, which feels great to feel normal after having a cold. But thanks for the concern. I may stop and get some water to drink to refresh my voice. All right, so we see Daniela from this Da Vinci Girl saying hello to everyone. All right, and we see Charles K joining from UK. Thanks for being online. Sorry, my chat fields are jumping today. All right, Brian DeBears is having issues getting Cubase to share audio resources. Can you show me the proper way to set this up in Cubase 15 Pro? So let me know exactly what you mean by having it like sharing audio resources. Do you want to send the audio out to a different program? Do you want to send it, is it like a like a audio performance issues? So if you could let me know, Brian, that would be helpful. Okay, so I see from John Barry VU says, okay, it says maybe this is with the naming. So it says John Barry, just says Greg, in the Acoustic Agent when you use a blank pad as a remote pad. All right, so let me see if I come here. These might be, let me see if I could. Okay, so let me come over to. Let's see if we're doing this. So I think it's maybe when you're assigning the pad mode. These may be fixed in the Acoustic Agent. Let me just try a different kit out of curiosity. Yeah, you might not be able to rename in the Acoustic Agent, but I will kind of play around with it some more before Friday and see if I could get that figured out for you, John. Sorry about that. All right, we see Cliff Scherer just joining from Germany. And we see from John Barry, just says you have to set color and pad by right click first to use blank pads. Okay. Yeah, I don't see the rename pad option there, but I'll inquire about it. Sorry about that, John. All right, Michael Teams has granted me 1 gallon of golden opulent Sunday ice cream for my family and myself to soothe my throat. It says his wife still is going through that also. So. All right, so we see Cliff Scherer just says, I have a chord track. What's the difference between Chord's Inspector Live Input versus Scale Assistant Inspector Snap Live Input? What to use when? So if you have an existing chord track in a project, so I'll come over here. So let's go to this project and I'll just so if I was recording events on a new track, so let's say if I wanted to come to a particular string patch here, and I didn't have an event, what I could do is just tell this particular event on the chords to snap to my live input. So we could just say, okay, we want to live input, and we'll say to chords. So now as we would play along, so as I would play the chords, I just played the same 3 notes over and over again. So let's say if I'm just here, so I'm just recording new parts. That will automatically match the chords from the chord track. So where often we would, so that's when we would use that function. If I have an existing part and I'm like, okay, I want to take this particular event here and I'm in the editor and then I'm recording in the editor, I could still use the live input. So this came Cubase 7. And then the chord editing functions in the Scale Assistant. This came several versions later, I think in 12 or 11. So at this point, we could snap live input, but we couldn't do this if there was no event that we were inside of. So that's, it kind of will do the same thing, and we could do this using the chord track, just like what we're doing here, or we could do it based on the editor scale. So the live input on the project window, so when we come over here, this is going to rely only upon the chord track. So as soon as we come over here to the live input for, let's say we select our particular event here, and when live input is on, this is going to follow only the chord track. But if we're in the event and we don't have a chord track, we could also have this follow this scale that we've defined. But again, we would need an event for this to live in, and this could follow the editor scale or follow the chord track. So if you wanted to follow the chords or just stay within the particular key, you could do that. So one is only on input without a part created. So if you just want to hit 3 notes and have the right chords play, that's when I would use on the, on the chord settings. And then if I would do the scale assistant for an existing event that I didn't need, I just wanted to follow the editor scale as opposed to, or the chord track, but I couldn't do this without an event created. But if I didn't have an event and I was just kind of wanting to input some stuff, I would just use the live function from the chords right there. All right. All right, so we see Gresham Makwena says, is there a quickest or shortest way to adding lyrics to melody in Cubase Pro 13? So let's say let me just open one up here. So a lot of people will put lyrics in, like if you get to the project, you'll have a project notepad. So we could come over and so here we can see our project notepad. All right, so let's say I just want to copy these particular lyrics. And then some people will take that particular notepad and we could have this set up as different marker tracks. So if we wanted to so if you wanted that kind of laid throughout the particular project, but let's say if I wanted to add some of these lyrics to notes, you could just come right over here and there's a text that you can enter in on each note if you're in the score editor. I think if we come over here, let's say we want to put in our lyrics. Then if I had copied that in, I could just come over here. Let's see if I go back to my sorry, let me just go to my notepad again. So once you have it copied over, you can just simply paste the lyrics in as well. So once you have it kind of copied, you can go into the score editor and just hit Command V or Control V and just do that, and you could have it automatically split across the different words. So if you have the lyrics I usually keep the lyrics in a notepad, and then that notepad, I have access to it, but we could just simply copy and paste that into the score editor as well. All right, we see Tim K joining from Zeist in the Netherlands. His cat buddy is waving a paw hello to my cat Steven and Stella and other pets. All right, we have Roland Stuff sending greetings from Sussex in England. All right, John Koskin is saying hello to everyone from Wisconsin. All right, so we see from Daniela, can you set up an example for drums where the snare have two channels, one for a mic on top and the other for the bottom mic, and demonstrate the variations of the Cubase drums in size and pitch tuning? All right, so let's take a look. Here, I'll actually just build it from a project here. All right, so let's say I have a snare top and a snare bottom mic in this example of this song. All right, so I want to add, let's say, an instance of Groove Agent. Okay, so let's say I want to take my snare top mics, I'll say my snare top mic here, and I'll drag that. And let's take my snare bottom mic. All right, so now when we come over, and I will just trim that sample. All right, so now at this point, if we wanted to, I think I could, let's come over here and say I want to assign, I could keep these on separate ones, but let's say now I want to quickly program a drum pattern. So I'll just come here to the drum editor. so I'll put this in a quick loop. Okay, so let me just put this loop, sorry about that. All right, so let's put in our snare here. All right, so now if I wanted to, take, let's say I have those two snares, and if I wanted to adjust, so these could be going to two separate outputs. So if we look at our mix console, I could now take this and send it to different outputs. So even if we wanted to send it to our different outputs here. But now if we wanted to adjust tuning, so we could adjust tuning, kind of coarse or fine tuning, volume. So if you wanted, and if you wanted this to go through different effects as well, so we could now just kind of take each of these and be able to route these to different buses. And now if I wanted to do different effects plugins, I could say, okay, on my snare top, I want to do, or my snare bottom, I wanted to add different effects. Or if we go to, let's say, our snare top, we can say here I want to add just a short reverb. So you could do stuff like that and have a lot of flexibility. So if you want to build up your own kits to do that as well, it's very easy. And if you want to look at like some of the kits, like let's say if you go to the kit here, or we'll look at one of the new ones that comes with Groove Agent SE6. Or we'll just say, okay, let's get to our studio kit. So even here, we could just say, and as we're playing, so if you have kind of built-in kits, so here we could switch between kind of different snares depending on the kit. So, and different kits can have, like if we open up like the Simon Phillips drums, you have a lot of control with the Simon Phillips drums here. So let's say if we go to the Simon Phillips studio drums, so depending on the kit itself, so here you could have like Simon's main kit where he has 3 different snares that he utilizes. And then when you come over to the main kit, Here you could also just choose for that to be trigger or what snare you want it to be. And if you want to switch that to like piccolo snare. So lots of different options for creating your own layered snares or kits that have support for them. All right, so we see artist Benny. Hello, should I get Cubase or Logic Pro? Cubase. So you have a wonderful community here that does support for you twice a week, answering your questions for you. And I think that you'll find that Steinberg is definitely kind of more the innovative company that comes up with all the ideas first. All right, we see Recyclop checking in from Finland. Thanks for joining us. We see Cliff Scherer just says, understood. Thanks, Greg. Okay, sorry, my chat field's jumping a lot today. Yeah, so we see artist Benny just commented, DaVinci Girl says, rather just pick one. Think about Ableton, but it's more between Cubase and Logic. Really comfortable in Logic, but the only problem is it doesn't run on Windows. So yeah, definitely Cubase. If you're a Windows user, it's kind of a no-brainer. All right, so we see from Alex Belcher, is there any way to export fold downs from the control room during audio export? So generally the control room is only for the monitoring path, and it doesn't, anything that's kind of happening in the control room is for monitoring is not going to be included within the exported audio mixdown. So if we think of anything that's going to be going through the control room is not going to be like any processing there, any effects processing that's going on there is not going to be represented in the mixdown. It's strictly for the monitoring path. All right, so we see from Gresham says, I've installed Cubase Pro 13 on my 2020 MacBook running Mac OS Sequoia. However, the sounds and instruments I'm using on my previous machine, also a Cubase Pro 13, are not working on this system. They appear as unregistered or missing, even though they were functioning correctly before. So were they functioning correctly on this particular, so let us know if it's like the included instruments or other instruments, maybe if you had like Howling in 7, which isn't included with Cubase or not, but also check to make sure. So check to make sure. Let us know exactly which sounds aren't being utilized. So there is a utility called the Steinberg Library Manager. So make sure if you open this up, this will give you kind of all of the content for particular instruments, ones that are kind of sold separately, as well as instruments that are included with Cubase, such as like Howling and Sonic libraries. So check this and see if your Steinberg Library Manager is seeing all of the content, and if you could let us know if it's every single instrument, if you installed them, like if you have your download assistant. So let's say if you go to your Steinberg download assistant, sometimes people will go to, they go to their Cubase Pro 13 and they install the Cubase Pro 13 on the new machine, but they don't necessarily install all of the instrument sounds. So make sure that you see all these, that they've been installed. If you kind of see the green check and it says install again, that implies that it has been installed already. So make sure that in the Steinberg Download Assistant that all of these are installed as well. So check those two things. See, Tim K is happy with his peach mango flavor ice cream from Michael Teams. All right, Roland Stuff asks, hi Greg, when generating harmony vocals, is there a way of defining which voice or voices those harmonies should be, soprano, alto, tenor, etc., before they're generated? I don't think before they're generated, but it's easy enough to kind of change. So let's say if we come here, we have a chord track. So let's say if I come,
I've got to turn it up, you wouldn't mind. Up until now, that was okay.
All right, so let's say if I come here, let's say I want to take that particular phrase and let's generate the harmonies. So we go to, because we have the chord track defined, we can now just get to audio and generate the harmony voices. So it doesn't allow us to define the voices, but if we say, all right, 2 voices, I think. So let's see if we do 3 voices, if it gives us soprano, alto, tenor. So 1 voice, what it gives us, soprano. So I think if we do 3 voices, let's see if it gives us soprano, alto, tenor. Yeah, and then if we do 4 voices, I think it'll be soprano, alto, tenor, bass. Yeah, so now as we listen to it here.
Up until now, that was okay. Guess all along I was so naive.
So if you wanted to, so it depends on how many voices you add, but once you're there, you could just go to the inspector and say, okay, I wanted to switch this from soprano to alto 2 instead. So 1 voice will give you soprano 2, soprano alto 3, soprano alto tenor, etc. And then you can modify it afterwards as needed. Right, reading through comments. See, Michael Teams is telling Artist Benny to go Cubase as well. All right, so you see from Vince's Fly V's asks, I have a command set to one pad on my controller. It's in a MIDI remote mapping assistant. As key commands, Windows zones, show next page. What does this command do? Okay. All right, let me get it set up. All right, make sure. So Windows zone, show next page. Okay, so let's see if maybe it's. Let me just see if it's maybe for plugin parameters. I'm not sure off the top of my head, so it might be sometimes with plugin parameters, if you want to go to the next, there's a next mapping page. So if this was set to quick controls, let's see if I open up my quick controls. Doesn't seem to be that. Let me see if it's. Make sure I have it activated correctly. So sometimes I was wondering if it was maybe like where we could come here and switch between different pages, like different tabs, but that doesn't seem to be it. I could do some more research on that and see if I can figure out exactly what that function's intended for. Sorry about that. All right, so we see from Grove Break, this is in Cubase 15 Inspector Tools, VariAudio audio where pit tabs are available on the original stereo audio event, but disappear after the event is cut and rearranged. All right, so. All right, so say I come over here, I have the event selected, and we see, so I see my inspector tabs here because we have the event. select it. Let's come over here and rearrange some of the parts. All right, but disappear after the event is cut and rearranged. So you just have to double click on the event itself, because this is kind of not at the track level, but those functions are going to be at kind of the event level. So if you double click on the event, we could see that the inspector changes from the sampler editor. And if we click here, we're on the track editor. So just double click on those particular events and then they'll all be visible. Okay. Okay, so just see from Karan Thacker 2605 just saying to DaVinci Girl, please help. But I don't see if it's if there's a question before that. So if you want to just enter it in the chat field, be happy to help. So I see the question now. So it says, I'm using Cubase 15 Pro. I'm stuck at mixing, mastering process. My tracks are not properly glued. Does that mean that the tracks aren't gelling in the mix? They aren't cohesive in the mix, or the events aren't glued together? So it's kind of hard to know. If you want to share a link to the project, I'd be happy to kind of listen to it and maybe give some advice, but it's kind of hard to say, if it's what's wrong with my mix without hearing it and having any context of it. But if you want to share a link to Club Cubase at steinberg.de, be happy to take a look at it for you and take a listen, offer some advice. All right, so we see Jacko Go official or Jackog official. Can you give some advice to make melodies that really fit with effects? So a lot of times, let's say if you just want to go back to this particular track. So I think sometimes people tend to use too many effects overall. That could be my old guy perspective. But let's say if I want to come over here, let's just kind of listen to this. So. Just fix.
That was okay. Guess all along I was so naive. Now you're packing boxes ready to leave.
on thing in the bass here real quick.
I've got to choose what's mine and what's yours. 'Cause now you're asking Beatles or
All right, so you know, if you want to do this, so like some classic things to do.
we played our records into the night. I turn it up, you wouldn't mind.
So I wanted to make sure that the melody is kind of heard a little bit. So this is kind of well recorded.
It's okay.
So let's say I want to maybe get a little rumble out. So I'll turn on my filter here.
Now you're packing boxes, ready to leave.
So some of those
Our
like
musical
breaths.
history laid out on the floor.
And I'll
I've got to choose what's mine and what's yours. 'Cause now you're asking Beatles or Stones. Something about that just sounds so wrong. Well, let's do it away to start a fight. Take the records that you like. Please stop asking Beatles or Stones.
and if I want to put like a little delay on it.
Just leave it alone.
So if I want to come here, I could just add another effect sense. Let's say I want to put on a
Used to
delay.
love when I Hey Jude.
And I always like having
I should've
tempo
told you
synced
out of
delays,
tune.
and like often like a quarter note.
Whatever you did,
Dotted quarter is a great delay
that
to work
was
with.
Okay. Up until now, that was okay. Suddenly it's Beatles or Stones. Something about that just sounds so wrong.
So we're going to take all of this off.
What a silly to start a fight, to take the records and lay it away. Please stop asking Beatles or Stones. Leave them alone. You don't know the words. You're scratching the vinyl. You get on my nerves. Suddenly it's Beatles.
And maybe we don't want the delays cascading as much, so I'm just going to come here and adjust the feedback down so we get just a little bit of delay.
Something about that just sounds so wrong. Well, let's do it away to start a fight. Take the records and lay it away. Please stop asking Beatles or Stones.
You know, so try to make the, you know, I think a lot of mixing problems are arrangement problems and maybe writing problems. So if you kind of get the melody to kind of sit in, you know, musically, getting it to fit in the mix is also easier to do. All right, we see Vince has a doctor's appointment today. Hope you have a good appointment. All right, so we see from John Barry, says, hi, another Groove Agent 6 minor issues when I have undocked pattern editor open and hit what would normally be playing a numeric pad. It docks to pattern editor. All right, let's take a look at it. Okay. Okay, so let's come over here to our player and say our pattern editor. Okay. All right, so let's see if I undock the pattern editor again. So I think okay. So now I'm hitting the, let's say if I stop here, let's say if I close this, just open this up. So let's say I hit play. All right, so let's see if it's docked in our player kit again here. Okay, so that might be considered, all right, so let's say if I'm here, so hitting enter, I'll mention that to them. It may be like hitting enter to close the instead of play, but I'll bring that to their attention, John. Okay, okay, so we see from Grove Break, hi Greg, I have a question regarding missing inspector tools. VariAudio are available in the original, but don't despair. Okay, I think we covered that already. All right, so seeing kind of more discussion about Karen Thocker's about glue not working correctly. So one thing that this might be, so I'm not sure if it's gluing the mix, as we mentioned, or if you're gluing kind of multiple events together. If it's going to be events, so let's say if we have a number of events, like on our project window here, all right, so if it's like, if you come here and we have glued like all these events together, so what you're doing is you're taking a bunch of events and turning them into parts. So if you do this, you may notice that we don't have like our clip gain handles. You would have to double click to go into the part editor, and then you could see clip gain handles as well as your fade in, fade outs just directly right there. So, and then if you are trying to get that back to the individual events, because what you've done is taken multiple events here and joined them and created a part, which is kind of a collection of multiple events. You could go to your audio menu here and just choose to dissolve part. Then they would be the individual parts. So the parts could turn into events, but a part is a collection of events. And if you wanted to, so if they were all glued together and now they seem forever stuck and you can't get the same level, you'd have to double click to go into the part editor, and that, or select the part, go to audio to dissolve the part. And once you dissolve the part, at that point we could have our events back. So let me know if that's kind of what you mean by the gluing. All right, so Cliff asks, is someone using Ranger Track function in real life, or is it more Steinberg's counter to other DAWs lacking session view a la Ableton? All right, so, the Arranger Track is useful for a lot of stuff because we have like many users that do, like lots of different jingles. So if you want to be able to, have different arrangements of a similar piece of music, we could come right over here and say, okay, we have this going on. Instead of playing straight linearly through, lots of people have used this. This was introduced in SX3 in 2003. So it's been 23 years old. It's been updated as well over the years. But what we can do is we can define our different parts of our song. So we could say, okay, this is my verse, chorus, this is my solo, this is a bridge. And once we've defined these different parts, we could put them, and we could have multiple arranger events. So we could say, okay, I want one that is an extended dance remix. I want one that's a album cut at 4 minutes. I want a 3-minute, 30-second radio play. I need a 30-second jingle, a 15-second version of the jingle, a 5-second version for YouTube ads. So this way we could take kind of one particular piece of music, and instead of having to have multiple arrangements, we could define our different parts and have different play orders. So I could actually, instead of playing linearly through, we could just kind of switch our different play orders here. So it's not playing linearly. And then if you needed a different version, you could just come here to play order 2. And now the cool thing is when you go to export, you can say, okay, I want to do my export audio mix down. If you have 5 different play orders, you can just come over here and you could export each of the play orders as part of a batch process as well. So you could just render out 6 different versions, each with different bit depths, file formats as a queue, so that you could just simply, export all your different deliverables right there. So lots of people use it just to have quick, fast alternative arrangements. All right, Karin Thacker just says, I tried glue compression, but it never happened. So it really, depends on your source material as well. So, having a bad mix and, hoping to fix everything with a glue compression, may not hide a bad mix. So I think we showed this in the last live stream as well, but let's say if we want to take this mix here and we'll do some glue compression on it. I'll just deactivate our play order here. So let's say I just get to the channel strip. It all began. And we'll try the tube compressor. The moment I laid eyes on him, he touched my hand, and the sky turned magic blue, and I was falling before I knew. All at once he kissed my face. The world was like a brand new place. Felt my fears all fly away. Don't it make you feel good? Knowing that somebody loves you. Don't it make you feel good? So we take that off. Knowing that somebody and let's come over to maybe our standard compressor. There especially. Smooth it out when things get rough. Keep your heart from giving up. Don't it make you feel good? So without somebody loves you. Don't it make you feel good? Knowing that somebody wants to give you their heart. So you could try, any of the compressor settings could give you glue, but depending on your mix, it may not, if the mix isn't in a great position to start with, you may not get the glue effect, that's going to instantly fix a mix. All right, so we see music for Old Piece Records, back to playing instrument from chord track. What does apply known chord mean? All right, let's take a look. All right, so let's say now I want this to play back from the monitored track. me just... Okay, let me see if it's over here. All right, so I think so let's say if I had this, all right, so let me just start here. And let's set chords to MIDI here on this. All right, so let's say, like maybe I wanted this particular voice here, let's say to, you know, if I wanted to overwrite that instead of analyzing, so let's come over here to chords. Right. So I think if I wanted to, let me just transpose these up or down. So let's say instead of analyzing the existing chords here, I could say let's have it automatically play, let's say a C major chord, and we'll see if these all change to kind of the C major, the chord that we defined. So if we wanted to overwrite those particular chord settings, we could do that as well. So it just allows you to overwrite the analyzed chords. Okay, so we see from, all right, so we see Bratman Studio on. All right, so we see from Karan Thakur says, I have 5 to 6 songs which I've dubbed, but I'm unable to work properly in mixing mastering phase. It says, now can I share the link, or do I have to upload the project somewhere? So if you want, you could share a link to me. I'd be happy to listen to it, give some advice on if you want to send a link to clubcubase at steinberg.de. So once again, clubcubase at steinberg.de. All right, wonderful to see Rick from Bratman Studio on. You see Steinberg MIDI likes Beatles and Stones. All right, so George just asking, hi Greg, I'm Trying to create a macro, I draw a range, and I have two commands: set punch point to selection range, activate punch in, punch out, assign a key command, but it doesn't work. All right, so let's give it a shot. So let's say, all right, so let's say we have this as our range. I'm going to just take off one preference that could affect its behavior. Okay, so let's make a macro to do punch in on the range and to activate that. All right, so let's just, I'm going to try each of these steps one at a time. So we'll say set punch points to selection range. Okay. All right, and let me see if the okay. All right, so let's give it a shot. So I'm going to give, let's say I have this as my selection range. Let's build a macro. All right, so I'm going to add that command. All right, and then I want to add activate punch in. And activate punch out. So we see that. All right, so I'm going to set my range here. Seems like that should work. Let me just try. All right, let me remove these. We'll do it one step at a time here. Okay, so that seems to work. So let me just come here. It actually looks like just the set punch points to selection range automatically then enables the punch in and punch out. So it may not be necessary to add that or to create a macro, but just that one particular keyboard shortcut does that. So we can see if I turn off my punch in and punch out, and I just trigger this particular key command. So let's say I want my range to be here for my punch points. So I'm going to say set punch points to selection range. I'll run the macro, and we will see if the punch points, we'll see the little red triangles come here, and if these are automatically turned on. So run the macro. So yeah. So if you want to set punch points to selection range, activate punch in, punch out. So you could just assign that same keyboard shortcut that you want to trigger the macro just to the set punch points to selection range function, because that automatically enables punch in and punch out. Sorry, it's a little confusing. I'm trying to make it easy for you by all right. So we see from at Grove Breaks, says the strange thing is that after editing the audio, these tools disappear. So, you know, I think it's going to be, this is going back to
Good.
you know, so if we're here and I cut the audio, so right now if I click once, I have the audio selected. So let's say if I cut this audio twice here, move this over here. So now when I have my, if I don't have anything selected, we have our channel inspector. If I double click, then we go into, so I could have the event selected here, but you may need to just double click to make sure what is active. So if I click here on the track, we can see that the inspector mode will change. So I think those tools are still there. You just may have to kind of change the focus by clicking on either the track or the event to see all of the different functions. So you may just have to double click to kind of reapply the focus to that particular area. You can see from Claes, just says a very nice song and singing. Yeah, it was from my friend Vince Melamed. He's kind of a legendary songwriter. He used to play with that little band called the Eagles in the 70s. I think he was the only one that didn't have to overdub his parts on the Eagles live record. All right, so we see, does SKI Remote work with Nuendo 14? So yes, it does. So that would be, so you could use like the Cubase IC Pro Remote. Sorry, my chat field jumped. All right, Steinberg MIDI is just mentioning, don't forget about density with MIDI effects and the logical editor to boost your creativity. All right, we see Danielle has to go. Thanks for joining us, being part of the community today. All right, Roland Stuff says, hi Greg, it's happened to me again. I can't find a selection to uncheck in Inspector Editor to stop VariAudio notes from not sticking in their changed positions. Can you please remind me? All right. So let me just say we're in. All right, so let's say we're in our VariAudio. All right, and can't find a selection to uncheck Inspector Editor, stop VariAudio notes from not sticking. All right, so let's say if I've changed these notes here, and I want to all right, so we're starting this on A flat. All right, let me just come over here to this. We'll do our VariAudio editing here on this particular event. We'll go back here to this one. So I think it's still is the VariAudio bypassed by any chance? But it seems like for me it's sticking to like the pitches that I changed it to. So as I start on C sharp, come back, I change the pitch, do some VariAudio edits here. We'll go back. And we're still kind of at C sharp 4. So maybe it's in the inspector tab of the VariAudio. Maybe it's just kind of bypassed right here. And that could prevent it from sounding the notes that were changed. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding. All right, so let's say, hi Greg, thanks for your patience. Do you have recommendations for a melody first approach to deriving chords from a given melody track leveraging Cubase functionalities? You know, so if I was just to, let's do new project here, okay, empty. And let me import just a melody from a, so sometimes, obviously the chords need to have 3 notes to be derived, but what you can do is I'm going to just choose to, let's import a track from a project. So let's say we'll just take this melody here, this vocal. All right.
We played our records into the night. I'd turn it up, you wouldn't mind.
So if I just had the melody, I mean, you could, this may not give you like the best results, but it could give you a starting off point. Is to, let's open a chord track.
I was so naive.
I'll just open an instrument track here first.
You're packing boxes, ready to leave. our musical history laid out on the floor. I've got to choose.
So we could just kind of come over here and say,
We played our records. We played our records into the night.
you know, and also let's say, you know, you do have chord pads. So if you go, okay, I know I'm roughly, you know, like I could say that we're starting off here. You know, like so we listen to our first phrase here. So we can say, okay, we have an A sharp 2 here. So, okay, maybe we're in B flat. So maybe I want to start off and I want to come over here. So sometimes you may be able to get like some chords from a melody. Sometimes it may not be that way, but you could also just kind of go to chord pads and say, okay, and there are presets that you can get on, you know, on the Cubase Nation Discord. So you could just say, okay, maybe, or you could say, okay, I want to go to B flat major, and I could just say, okay, I want to turn on my chord pads. And we could just say, okay, as we come over here to this particular instrument, that we could, as we trigger chord pads, we could just say, okay, we want, you know, these chord pads to, you know, come over here and just kind of try out, you know, different chord pads and audition those. So let's say if I want to switch this to my chord pads input. But you could experiment with, you know, chord pads are really good for this as well. So you could, you know, just kind of audition different chords and see how they fit. I think a lot of people, you know, there's no obvious, you know, it's like the classic, do you write the music or the lyrics first? You know, whatever works. But, you know, check out, you know, some melodies you may be able to kind of extract chords from the melody depending on the melodic contour of it.
We played our records in.
So let's say, okay, maybe when you come here, you could say, you know, which says that we played our records.
We played our.
So we could say, okay, maybe this would be a C chord that we would want to use. So we could just say, you know, so you could just kind of play around with the chords, but, you know, there's no kind of instant sing a song in and then have it generate music that's kind of not incredibly hokey AI based. That's kind of embarrassing to listen to. So, all right, great to see Pablo on from Galicia, España. So we had the whole, I think we had 2/3 of Hot Mess on. It's great. Everyone's always happy when Pablo makes it. All right, so we see, how can we see question from Weiss Audio? How can I export Groove Agent Mixer to Cubase with effects? So I think that might have changed with 6. Let me just confirm. I'll just get rid of these tracks here real quick. Because I think that there might be some effects that are in Groove Agent that aren't necessarily inside of Cubase. so let's say if we're Alright, so let's say if I want to come over here, so let's see if we export this. And let's look at in our mix console here. Let me just you just put a delay. Then just
You wouldn't.
I'll just need to start the process again so I can keep track. All right, and let's go over here to so let's see. Yes, I think this functionality may have changed. Let's see if we, but let's make like my snare loud. Let's do the overhead and room down so we can, so we'll have an obnoxious snare. All right, so you can see our current that we have just those channels. Let's export. We'll bypass the local. We'll see if we keep the local effects. But I don't think that, since not all of the effects actually carry over. And let me just see if we, as we play it now, I don't think we'll hear that that delay. Yeah. So it might be something that's coming, so it could be more seamless like it was in the past, but I'll make sure to reiterate that to the team. All right, music for Old-Piece Records. What does the crown with the number next to it in the chat next to the names mean? I think it might be like the first few people that log in. Might be that. All right, great to see Sable Winters on. And she's received 1 gallon of coconut almond fudge ice cream. All right, Pablo is asking, we see just question form have from Cliff Scherer, Sprite to the forum, says, have Omnisphere 3, what would be a good reason to buy Absolute 7? I think it's just another palette of sounds. So one, you get orchestral sounds. You're going to get, really high quality grand pianos. With the grand, you get Etude. You're going to have, Groove Agent 6, FM synthesis. So, just like, people have a Roland and a Yamaha and a Chord keyboard to have different palettes of sounds. So I think it's a great variety of sounds. All right, so and Pablo's question, how can I use a reference track in WaveLab? All right. All right, so let's come over here. We'll create, let's say, an audio montage. All right, so let's say if we have our particular track here. All right, so now I'm going to click on Add Track, and we're going to add a reference track in the montage. All right, so now what you could do is as you have a reference track, you can just simply kind of switch back and forth between the reference tracks. So like as you're playing, let me just switch my audio interface here.
If you could see me now with my trailer trash peroxide queen, she's half in the.
So now, if we had everything, like we had this, like let's say this is our reference track that we wanted to mix. This reference track won't be played back through the plugin section. So let's say if we come over here.
She's everything I need, but she ain't you.
So let's say I have this going on my master section. When I switch to the reference track, it's not going through any of the effects processing in the channel. So it's serving just as a reference. So now if I wanted to come here, and now I could switch to the reference track.
I wonder how different I'd be while I'm thinking of you. She wasn't there when I went to prom.
So at that point, you could just simply have a reference track that doesn't go through the entire like processing chain. So you're just listening. So if you have a mastered file, it's not going through your mastering processing chain. It's just playing back raw through there, and you could just simply switch back and forth like so. All right, so we see from Kevin Ariel Matamoros says, hello, I'm music production student. I want to buy the academic version of Cubase, but I don't know if I'll be able to upgrade my license to the normal professional version later on. So you'll be able to upgrade. So when you get your first initial, you get your academic discount on the initial purchase, and then from there, if you wanted to upgrade, you would just be on a normal upgrade path. There isn't going to be educational discounts on updates and upgrades in the future, but you could take your educational and then upgrade it as you go on. So if you're using it in school now and you graduate, you could still update your Cubase afterwards. But the educational discount is going to be applied on the initial purchase, not on the updates, but you can update it and use it for the rest of your career. All right, Pablo is asking, another thing, can effects be applied, for example, a compressor through WaveLab ARA to an audio region inside Cubase, inside of Cubase, of course? I hope that makes sense. I think generally the ARA is going to be more for kind of the sample editing. So when we come over, all right, so I'll come over here. Let's do an ARA edit. So we'll come here to our extensions. We choose WaveLab. I don't think we'll get like a master section in WaveLab, but more kind of the editing functions. So I could come over here and just delete one side or reverse this, but it's not going to have a master section to do processing on because that engine is still playing back through Cubase, but it's going to be just basically the audio editor of that is going to be accessible, but not going through like the WaveLab engine, but the WaveLab editing functions. All right, you see Gareth is listening to the Hangout while prepping a guitar for sale. Pablo's wondering why is he selling a guitar. All right. So we see Jackie Barr. Is there any way to assign a key signature that is not transposing? I'm mixing audio tracks and the song changes keys twice, but I don't want the audio to transpose. No MIDI tracks. Do you need a key signature for the, you can put a key signature, like if you want, like as a reference, like, if we come here and I want this as a reference, just for my key signature and my chords in my song, like as a mixing reference. So if I'm talking to musicians, like, oh, okay, go to the D flat chord, and you know exactly how everything is laid out for you. What you could do is just simply come over here if you want that for kind of aesthetic purposes with your key signature. So if I come here, we could say, show, where you could say, okay, we want to show the scales. So you can say, okay, we're in, A flat major or G sharp major here. So as we work with this, so if you want that to just be like a visual reference, just simply come right over here and you can mute this and, and don't have any of the audio tracks follow chords. Just say follow chord track to off, and then you could see all the chords. It's not going to make any sonic change to the audio files, but you could have kind of the whole chord track for your project laid out for you. All right, we see Sable Winters has stepped away for a little bit. Thanks for joining us. Pablo's asking, is it possible to create a macro to load a specific track preset? So I'm afraid not. I've kind of asked for it. I've also asked for, and I'll continue to lobby for like a default track preset. So if you, every time you add a track, you want like this channel strip plugin on or something like that. But it hasn't happened yet. So there isn't a way that I know of, or to have a key command to load a specific track preset. But I'll continue to fight for it. All right, so you see, hi Greg, can I select a chord in MIDI and hear all the notes at the same time? Okay. So let's say if I'm here, and let's say if I have all right, so I think, let's see if we grab so when we kind of click on it here, we could hear the individual notes. But if you wanted to, and let's see if we open up maybe if we do the in-place editor, let's see if we could, this gives us the, so let's see if, so if you hit Command-Shift-I, you can do it in the in-place editor. But I don't think you could do it in the key editor to hear them all at once. You can scrub. If you have like a scrub wheel on your controller. But if you go to the in-place editor, which is Command-Shift-I, if you wanted to just kind of audition like a particular chord, but it doesn't get you too much more than just kind of then playing it. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to do, but maybe Control or Command-Shift-I and investigate the in-place editor, because you have the play tool there that you could kind of just click on. Pablo's happy he made 3 questions. All right, Alex is asking, trying to figure out how to turn off the function where a new track is automatically muted. Thanks. So I think it could depend on like your solo state. So if I come here, let's say, okay, if I want to get rid of, if I come here, I add an instrument track. All right, so we add a groove agent. It's not soloed, but if a track is soloed, and let's say if we go to a new project, we'll create empty, because the current state is that we have a soloed states there. So if I now come over and add an audio track, it'll probably be muted. So make sure that this solo state is turned off. Then when you add an audio track, it won't be muted. I'm not sure why it carries over from old projects, inactive projects to active projects, but check that. All right, Steinberg MIDI says, Jazz, you know, you and Greg's going to have to teach me how to play bass. Laughing out loud, joking. So maybe we'll do it on Friday's Zoom social. Michael Teams is happy that Pablo's been storing up his questions. So Pablo says he really likes the new Groove Agent. He updated it to Absolute 7. Sorry, my chat field jumped. Okay, so George is asking, so it seems like the select punch points to select range already activates the punch points. It says, but now I have the problem that I cannot delete the macros I have built. Is there a trick to delete a macro? So let's see, I built kind of the same macro in error. So let's get to the key commands. So I will select this, and we see this little trash can. Come over here, we'll select that. Let's see if maybe, oh, let's click on the little remove, that removes the key command. Did that remove it? Yeah, it seems like that would work, but it doesn't seem to be. Let's see if we, oh, maybe if I just come here and click, yeah. So click on this particular delete macro, this trash can. This will delete the command, and this will delete the function within the macro. So click on this trash can. Sorry about that. All right, you see Vince is off, so have a great doctor's appointment. All right, Steve Green asks, hi Greg, I renamed my events, but in Media Pool, the events don't correspond with the track's naming. Is there a way of globally changing the Media Pool events to match the project event names? All right, so let's say if I come over here, so we have audio 1, audio 2, and I'm going to record on these tracks. All right, so when we look at this, we could see kind of the actual file name, and then so we could change the track name here. So let's say we call this Steve, So if we continue, now we can see our name. Of the files will change. So we have a description and name. So if I want to rename all of the files, all of the events, so when I come here, let's say, okay, we call this Steve Green, and I hold down the Control or Command key, we can see that each of the events will be renamed like so. But the actual audio file itself this is an event that Cubase is seeing in this project, but that event is playing this particular audio file. So the easy way is to just kind of, to rename the let me clear my throat. I'm going to get a glass of water real quick. Bear with me for a second. All right, sorry about that. All right, so now we can see that the events and the actual files themselves may not change. So if we want, and I think Nuendo has like some special renaming functions. So we could rename the selected events, but not necessarily the underlying audio files. So I would always, recommend, to, intentionally name the file, the track before you record. If you have the option of doing that, you could go through here and type in new file names if you wanted to. But, you might have to do that depending on the recording for a number of different events. And in Cubase, there isn't a way of kind of batch redoing that. In Nuendo, in the pool, there's kind of a rename function. So if we come here, I don't think it's still in Cubase. I'll just check. But yeah, there's a rename capability, because sometimes when you're dealing with like thousands of files for sound effects or post, it's more applicable. But the name of the event is always, can always be independent. But if you go to like the file name here, you could just, type in the file names. But, it's kind of, if they get accidentally, disassociated, because that event is always going to look for this audio file name in that location. So if that name changes, that's why it has to kind of be intentional, so that file can always be linked to where that event occurs in the particular project. So Pablo is just saying Etude Great Grand Piano. Yeah, it was actually kind of sampled with like a robot to get all the velocity layers incredibly consistent. All right, Jackie Barr says, what's the difference between bounce selection and render in place? When would you use each? All right, so let's say I had a number of files. Here, let me just... All right, so let's say I have a number of files here, and I wanted to turn these 5 separate files into one file. That's when I could do a simple bounce selection. And now that one file, we could have it replaced, is now one file that was 5 separate files with all of their spacing. Now, when we do a bounce selection, it doesn't include any processing. So if I had the effects, so I wanted to come over here to my EQ. We have my EQ on, and let's, throw in, let's say a delay. So we have all of my effects. A bounce selection won't incorporate any of those effects. Or if we have MIDI, bounce selection doesn't do anything with MIDI, but render in place does. So when we go to render in place, we could come over here to our settings. We could do this as separate events. We could have the original dry channel settings. We could include the EQs and inserts. We could include descends or master effects. We could add a tail. We could mix down multiple events. So a render in place is going to allow you to include the processing as well. So now I could render in place, and we could keep the original track and have it muted and have our new files. So render in place gives you the option of keeping the originals intact. You could have it replaced if you wanted to, but render in place includes all of the third-party processing. Now, when we come over here and we want to glue, what gluing events does, I'm going to hold down my Alter Option key, and this is now a container. This container is called a part. Now this part holds the 5 different audio events. So we haven't included any rendering, we haven't bounced these, we haven't created a new file, but we've created kind of a container for the particular files so that we can move all these, and this could be across multiple tracks as well. So if I come here, I could say, okay, I want to come over, so you could just say, okay, I want to glue all these. So, now you could come over here, and people often run into this where they say, oh, I can't adjust my gain or do a fade out. That's because you need to double click, and that's being done inside of what's called the part editor. And now we could come over here and take different parts and move it around to be a little more creative. This is kind of how we did a lot of audio editing when you had 4 tracks of audio on your computer. It's like, oh, I could get this part to fit in here, that part to fit in there. So that's what gluing does. So gluing allows you to kind of treat all those like multiple events as a single entity. Bounce selection will create a new audio file. Render in place will include all of the processing if needed or chosen. Pablo likes the punch library, new drum set. Okay, so rolling stuff. Okay, so he has a clarification. Says, hi again, Greg. My VariAudio says my VariAudio problem was that after generating a harmony, when I move any of the pitches, they just go ping straight back to where they were. I seem to remember that there's a setting in the inspector that needs unchecking to stop this happening, but I just can't remember what it is. Many thanks. All right. Okay, I know what you're talking about now, sorry. All right, so I'm going to come over here. We have our chord track, so we're going to generate our harmony voices. All right, and now when we go into VariAudio and we go to Edit, these will be kind of, when we go to move them, they kind of snap immediately back. So what we want to do is we'll select that particular track. We will just on follow chord track. I think if we just choose off, now we can just move those without those snapping back. So click on the track and follow chord track, change that to off. Sorry for misunderstanding. All right, so we see from Pablo, it says now I need a key command to toggle the reference track with the audio montage. I think it's just look it up real quick. It's let's take a look what it is. But there is a key command for it. All right, let me just So I think it's...
She was there when I wrote my first song. Little ditty about an Indian princess, and she tried to sing along.
So hit 1 on the numeric keypad, then N.
You sit, she smiled and listened and helped AM. Need you another time.
So on the numeric keypad 1, then the N as a number key. Then you could just kind of switch back and forth. So give that a try. So on the numeric keypad, 1 followed by N. Great. So you see Rick from Bratman Studios is working with Absolute 7 FM Lab for inspiration and rhythms. Going to do some soundtrack stuff. Also spent money in a Jeep. All right. Have fun with FM Lab. Okay, so we see from Jackie Bear says the key signature I asked about is so that the audio tuning will know what key to snap to. Yep, so if we come over, let's go into here, and we go into VariAudio. Sorry for misunderstanding. But we could set the editor scale, but that won't. So if we're in, let's say, G sharp major, now when we come over and say quantize pitches, we could just do that. So, but that won't affect any of the, and if you have different, like a key signature change, I think may have been a question. So let's say if I'm here, if you really need it to, hang on a second. If you really need it to, let's see. So if we have our key here set to G sharp, let's see if I go to this segment, if we could have a different key. So let's say if we go to E. So if you need it to be different files, what you could do, like different keys in different areas for that, what you could do is just simply do a bounce selection. So if I come here, let's get audio to bounce selection. So now I could come over, we'll edit VariAudio, say, okay, I want this in G sharp. And now I could have this in E. So I come back here, E. Looks like it might be on a track. All right, let's see if we're E there, and if we are G sharp, let's see if it's tied to the track or to the event. Well, you could always set it from the chord track as well. So if you're using the chord track and you have different keys set in a chord track instead of using the editor scale, which will be global. So let's say if I come here and we're using, let's say G sharp major, and I want to make this, let's say at this point, okay, so we have G sharp major and C major starting at measure 21. So now I'll edit our VariAudio. All right, so if let's say if I move this over, and we quantize to scale, and we use the chord track, so you may experiment with all right, so let's say we'll quantize these, and we're using the scale, so let's say we'll quantize the pitches. Yeah, so try putting in like your different scales there. I'll play around with it some more, see if I get a better logic, but you may have to just use the chord track for the scale for that. Sorry about the confusion on my part. All right, hi Greg, how can I route multiple 6 hardware synths on Cubase? Best wave, only have 2 MIDI in and out. So if you have 2 MIDI in and out, you probably have 2 MIDI ports. That gives you 32 MIDI channels. So each MIDI port will be 16 MIDI channels. So if you have 6 devices, if they're all on individual MIDI channels, so let's say you go out of port 1 and you go into 3 different synthesizers. So you go out to in, out to in of synth 1, out of synth 2 to in of synth, out of synth 1 to in of synth 2, out of synth 2 to in of synth 3. So you basically kind of just daisy chain away. So you could do that for your two different MIDI ports and have the MIDI be generating. Now I'm not sure if you have the capability of having all those sound, if you're 6 instruments, if you have a mixer to have those all sound at the same time, or if you want to just simply play the MIDI and record it into Cubase as audio, one instrument at a time. You could do that. It really depends on if you have a mixer, but it's very common in the old days to say, okay, because MIDI ports were expensive back in the day before there was like 8x8 MIDI interfaces. So there'd be a lot of times where excuse me, there'll be a lot of times where you have like instruments. I'm using MIDI channels 1 through 8 on port 1 for this instrument, MIDI channel 9 for a drum machine, MIDI channel 10 for this, MIDI channel 11 for this device. Port 2, so one MIDI port could do 16 MIDI channels. So if you're running multi-timbral instruments on each of those, you may have to kind of be careful, but you could just take the input of one from the output of another instrument and kind of daisy chain along that way. So you could also use like a through, but just go out to in, out to in, out to in, and you could do that for multiple ports with multiple instruments. If you do like 4 or 5 instruments, there might be a little bit of a delay, and that's just the nature of external MIDI. So Gareth is fixing his guitar and making dinner. So Beanbag 59 says, hey, would you recommend Cubase or Logic? Cubase. So. And we see how our Cubase stock plugins. So I can say that there's probably a lot of plugin developers that don't like us because they tend to have our users not actually need to purchase a lot of additional stock plugins. So we see a question, are Cubase updates free? So they're not free. There are a number of maintenance and new features that are released throughout the product life cycle. But it's, there's a lot of effort and a lot of engineering and, effort and, and investment that go on to make a new Cubase version. I think that a new Cubase version is often like 2 or 3 updates from competitive products. All right. So you see from Beanbag says you have to pay to upgrade or you can stay on your current version. Also, are they huge updates worth paying for, and how often are they? So usually there's about a major significant update about once a year. It's usually around $99. Your existing version will work forever, perpetually. So no worries with that. So you don't have to upgrade. And, if you want the new features, you could use it. If you want to skip a version, so some people may update every other version, and that's fine. So all right, so let's go to some of the questions that were mailed in. All right, so we had a question, does Cubase 15 support Loopback like stereo tool? There are some tools that will allow you to kind of loop back directly into Cubase. Steinberg makes one called MixKey that you could use. Most of the time, what you want is like your particular. So this is kind of a software audio interface driver. So you could say, and this is a free. It's currently a free version. It's a public beta, so you could just simply route anything like other programs and use MixKey as your audio input. So, you know, you can check out Steinberg's mix key. A lot of times when we do loopback, it could be using an audio interface that supports it. So it's often properly done through an audio interface. So let's say I have the Steinberg UR24C, and we'll show you how to do kind of loopback functions here. So I'm going to go, let's open up a web browser. And we'll go to all right, so let's come over here.
And mixing scenarios.
All right, so what I want to do is route my system audio, and we'll have, and a lot of audio interfaces have this. I'll say, okay, we want to route this to my UR24C streaming music, but I have a Rode mic, it does it. I have my Yamaha mixer, it does it. It's very similar, very common things. So now what I want to do is come over here. Let's add an audio track. I want my inputs coming from my streaming left, right. So we'll give it a name. All right, so I'll place this in record. And we'll hit play.
A look at RoomWorks. This is one of several reverbs that's built into Cubase, and I think it's one that often gets overlooked. It's a very capable and versatile algorithmic reverb, and it features a very simple and intuitive interface. So let me show you a few practical ways that I use RoomWorks in my productions to create space, depth, and atmosphere in a mix.
The same audio interface has
Every
basically
has
multiple
its own unique
drivers.
sonic character. And over time, I think you naturally develop a preference for how different reverbs function within your mix.
So
One way
I'll go
that I
ahead
often
and
use
stop
RoomWorks
this.
is as a shared effect send to create a cohesive.
All right, now we'll go back and listen to our recording.
A look at RoomWorks. This is one of several reverbs that's built into Cubase, and I
So
think
this
it's one
way,
that often
any
gets
audio
overlooked. It's a very
that's being
capable
routed
and
out
versatile algorithmic reverb
to the
and
streaming device can be recaptured directly back into Cubase with high quality. Okay, next question. Hi Greg, hope you are well. Can you please show how to save kits and samples in new Groove Agent 6? The menus seem to be slightly different, so I'm not sure based on the ways you've demonstrated in the past with Groove Agent 5. Thank you. Yeah, it's actually a little easier, I think. So let's add, we'll just do Groove Agent SE because everyone has that with their copy of Cubase. And let me just go to my favorites. All right, so let's say I now have like these samples here. And this is my custom kit that I've made, and I want to save this. So if I right click, and this is actually made a little more obvious in version 6, feature I kind of lobbied for. It used to be that this wasn't checked by default. So it was kind of like, oh, export files, and it was like a black icon on black. So this is enabled by default because if we choose to export the kit with the sample name, so let's say, okay, we want to put this on our desktop, so we'll create a new folder. We'll call it February 24th, 2026. Okay, so now when I hit OK, we could save this particular preset. We'll give it a name. All right, so now when we go to our Finder and we look, desktop disappeared from Finder. It's annoying. But at that point, we could just I'll just export it to my documents folder here quick. So, but this is automatically checked now. So let's come over here. All right, so now we'll just but yeah, that's really kind of all you have to do is just kind of now just kind of export the kit with samples, and you don't have to worry about checking the export files. You could just simply do that right there. So, and you can see here's the particular folder, and so you could navigate and export those kits with the samples right there. All right, question. Hello, Greg. Is there a way to fold tracks and group them in the mixer just like it's done in a project window? If not, how do you recommend to improve the workflow in the mixer while having lots of tracks to mix horizontally and vertically? So what I like to do is let's take a look at, so if we have a project with lots of folders, all right, so if I go to the visibility tab here, so one of the things is we could just say, okay, we want to see all of our folders. Okay, so let's say, okay, I want to, like when I'm here in guitars, so I could hide a particular folder, but if I hold down the shift key, I can now only see the guitars, or I could only see the keys. So now I could only see the background vocals, I could only see the lead vocals, and I want to see all my VST instruments, all my group channels. So open up the visibility, and you could do this in your mixer as well. So as soon as we are here, just hold down the shift key, and then you could choose to, so if I want to see everything, I want to see only my drums, just come right there. There's just my drums. I want to see now percussion, I want to see guitars. So we could just kind of see all of our particular folders right here in the mixer, and then you could shift to just view only those particular tracks and filter those from view. All right, next question. Can I assign a VCA or something similar to control all the gains for tracks at once? Let's say I want to reduce all gain for all tracks by 1 dB at once. Okay, so let's come over here. Okay, so if I want to just take all of my drums here, so let's say we're listening to our drums. So I could right click, we'll add a VCA track to the selected track. And now I have my VCA track here. So if you need to do like little tweaks of, you could just take add it to a VCA fader, and that way if they have existing automation, even if the automation is going in a contrary motion, it will still be kind of trimmed. And if you want, you could also just say, okay, I want to take my 2 kicks and let's add a VCA fader to my kicks. Let's say I have 3 kicks. And let's say I have my snares. So let's add a VCA track to the snares. Let's say toms. And let's say cymbals. And then I could take my selected VCA tracks and add a VCA track to those. So now I can take all my drums down, just my cymbals, just my snares, my kicks, or all drums. So overheads and hi-hats, and then global, just like that. So you can have nested VCAs. All right, next question. Can you show me how to automate a plugin so it only turns on during the chorus but is off at the verse? Okay, so let's say I have all of these going. Let's say I take my 2 guitars and I want to add a group track to my 2 guitars. Okay, so on my guitar group, let's go ahead and we'll add, let's say, chorus effects. I'm going to right click, go to modulation, okay, I'll turn the mix to 100%. All right, so now I want to automate, let's say as we're playing. So now I'm going to automate descent going on and off. And say now it's going on. So now go ahead and rewind, and we can now just see that we're going to have you can see the automation that we just wrote. See it turn on. So that's how you do it. So just, click on right, and then you can turn the effects end on and off and be able to automate accordingly. All right, so we had a question. I still struggle with punch in and punch out. It's not really comfortable, and I tend to shy away from using it. A friend suggested that I should use it more often when recording guitar for him. So here's my question, please. Is it possible to have a macro that puts punch in and punch out points at the range start, end, and activates record mode, punch mode, and another macro that deactivates punch mode? I want to remember that once you show how to move the punch in and punch out points with the mouse and the time, example 8 bars, and move 8 bars forward and backwards, but I can't seem to find it in the Cubase index because maybe I'm looking at the wrong year. All right, so let's say, and we talked about this a bit here, so let's say, if you want to, there's a preference that could help with if you're doing a lot of punch-ins. If you go to editing, to say that the range selection, I think it's cycle follows range selection. Okay. So anytime that you want to do, let's say, a punch in at a particular point in time. So let's say you're doing, and sometimes punches can be like, very precise, and if you're not recording to a click, you may just go, okay, I need to punch in, and I'm going to grab the range tool. And at this point, you could, if you just hit I and O, we could have the punch in and punch out automatically enabled. So let's say if I add a new track here. All right, so let me just add an audio track. Make it a mono. So as soon as I come over here, now that I have I and O on, it's going to punch in, record, and punch out. So I move my locator again. It's going to punch in. So I say, okay, I need a super tight punch. Now, if I have this range selection, we can just kind of nudge that range selection using the control and the left and right arrow keys. So if I'm on a particular track, I could just say, okay, I need to just punch in right here, and I'm doing this is like 3 beats. So now I could just punch in, and then I say, okay, let's move that range, and I could just continue to kind of just punch right in. If I need to do just little bits, I could just rewind a little bit to catch the punch. So let's say I just rewind, I use my right arrow or left arrow, and I can say, okay, let's come over here, play. It'll just automatically punch in, punch out. So if you have the locators follow the range, you could just simply use the left and right arrows to move that particular range and really kind of optimize and speed up punch-ins and navigating punch-ins and punch-outs. So play around with that. All right, so you see, hi, how would you go about the following? Say you have made an instrumental track and load another song, a song you want to remix, and now you want to sync both tracks tempo-wise, but 2 things. You cannot adjust the project tempo, you have no track information, BPM, etc. of the song you loaded in. My workflow, hang on 1 second. My workflow, I make sure both tracks start on the same first downbeat, and then use sizing applies time stretch option of the selection tool. So I drag the song track in or out depending on what's too fast or too slow. Drag, then listen, and Control Z, drag, listen, Control Z, drag until I get it right. Then I unmixed the song with SpectraLayers extension, leaving only the acapella. All right, so what I would do, let's just come over here. And I probably don't have like great examples for remixing, but we'll import a couple of audio tracks. Sorry, let me just. All right, so let's say I have two songs that are going to be different tempos. All right, so let me just. All right, so let's say we have this song is this tempo. And this song is this tempo. All right, so what I want to do is first I'm going to put them into different spots of the project, and I'm going to figure out what the tempos are of the songs. So I'm going to come over here, let's get to project menu, and let's go to tempo detection, tempo track, tempo detection, and we'll analyze. Okay, so we'll go ahead and take a quick listen. All right, so let's say, so we know it, so this tempo is fluctuating. All right, and we're going to say this is kind of where our downbeat is. So we'll make this 4/4. All right. All right, and I want to do the same thing to this song. I'm putting it in a different spot so that we have our two tempos are independent for each of the songs. So select that, project tempo track to tempo detection. All right. All right, so we're going to come right over here and say this is 4/4. Okay, so now we've kind of figured out what the base tempo of each of the tracks are. So now what I want to do is to select the two events. Let's go to audio to advanced, and we'll say set definition from tempo. And we could save this information. What this is going to do is basically embed the tempo information into the particular track. So let's say roughly we listen to our tempo here. So maybe it's fluctuating. We will say, now I want this to be like a perfect 124 beats a minute. I could take my tempo track off and I'm going to type in 124. Now it's going to play back perfectly at 124 beats a minute. And now when I take this file over, so I could just come over here, let's select this file. And now what I want to do is I'll move this up and let's go like 4 bars. And now we could just simply kind of switch back and forth. So now both of these are now following 120 4 beats a minute. So everything is going to be at the perfect steady tempo. So as I come over here, we'll just say, now we're going to have the same tempo, and it's going to just switch back and forth between the songs. Even though these were completely different tempos originally. So as we do that, every single part will speed up and slow down from its original varying tempo to a steady tempo. So I don't think you have to go through kind of that very elongated process that you're doing. So figure out what the tempo of the original files are, do a tempo detection on the files, and then apply the tempo, go to, so do the tempo detection. Once that's done, select the event, go to advanced to set definition from tempo, and then you could apply a common tempo, and those two files will automatically speed up and slow down to match whatever tempo you have. So instead of it following the fluctuating tempo, I could just have it follow, so if I come here and say, let's make it 144. $104. Or if you wanted to even have a different tempo track, you could say, okay, I like 124. Let's do a new tempo track here. And then I could just say, okay, let's take this, and I want that to kind of speed up and slow down as we're listening to it. And you can do that for single tracks or multi-tracks as well, with kind of the same level of freedom. So give that a try. All right, let me jump back to some of the live questions. Thanks for sending questions in advance. You can send them to clubcubase@steinberg.de. We see from Roland Stuff says, thanks for demonstrating the VariAudio snapping back problem I had. Turns out I had no track option showing the track inspectors, why I couldn't see what to adjust. Yeah. And as Roland Stuff mentions, that you could choose what track inspectors that you see visible. All right, we have Uno Mementos in Finland on the road, but he's whacked the like button, as you'll see everyone on Friday. Thanks for the kind words, Gareth. Says massive thank you to Maestro Greg for your wisdom. And Gareth says, DeForce says, smash the like button. All right, DJ Stat says, all right, Greg, obviously Absolute 7 has recently been released. You know if Steinberg is going to do an offer to customers that already own a few of the instruments. So yeah, there are discounted updates if you own like Halion or you own Groove Agent. So let's take a look. All right, so let's say if we want to buy, you can say updates and upgrades. All right. So you can see from Absolute 6. So there's also, I think it might be, so if you come here to full versions and you can say, if you own Halion 6, you can say, okay, I want to do this, you want to do a competitive upgrade. So there's like different versions that you can get and discounts if you already own some of the instruments included. So look under full versions, under cross grades, and there's also updates and upgrades from earlier absolute versions as well. All right, Philip Goff says, when I use a delay, the orange adjustment bar does not show up in the inspector. How do I get that to show up, please? Okay, so let's say I wanted to throw a delay on this particular track. So you want to make sure that you're doing it as a send effect. So if you go to the sends, right click, we can say we want to effects, you'll see add effects track to send 1. So let's say we want this to be a delay. We'll go to our studio delay. So you should see the bar there. Now if it's not set to orange, it could be set to pre-fader. So if it's like, if you right click and you see it kind of like this aqua bluish color, I'm really terrible at colors, I missed that day of school. You can just simply right click. If it's that color, just right click and say move to post fader. But if you're doing it as an insert, you wouldn't see that particular adjustment because the insert's going to be dedicated for that particular channel. So if I add a delay here, we don't see the amount because we're not sending it out to anywhere. It's inserted on that particular track. But when we go to sends, that's when we can just simply see the amount of how much we're sending of the dry signal and how much we're sending out to the effects return channel that we created. So make sure that's into sends, and you could just simply come here, and if you have an effects track already, so let's say we have an effects track loaded, we would come over here. So let's say we have a mono delay. Okay, so now when I come to this particular track, I would just be able to see my mono delay there, turn it on, enable it, and then I could set the amount of the send right there. All right, wonderful to see Gerald Ely on from Martinez, California. All right, so we see from DJ Stats, just says the current offer doesn't seem to reflect the price. It takes into account customers owning certain instruments in the bundle. So it's not going to be every instrument's reflected in a discount, but you know, some of the major ones like Groove Agent and Halion are. So we see G Mitch 8247 says, I have a blind friend who uses Pro Tools because he can use SoundFlow, which allows for speech prompts. Example, create an audio track. He would switch to Cubase if he had something like that for the blind. So we have lots of blind users, you know, Stevie Wonder, you know, one of my Grammy Award winning mastering engineer friends, Greg Lukens. You know, he's able to do everything blind. I've also helped out Ellis Hall with his Cubase setup, another blind singer, keyboardist, amazing musician. So lots of blind people are using Cubase, using screen readers, which is generally their preferred method, and keyboard shortcuts. So it doesn't seem to be a problem for many blind people. All right, so we see from DL White says, wow, I just popped in and caught the VCA track demo. That's going to be a game changer. Thanks. All right. All right, Pablo's here with coffee. Not fair. Pablo's saying nice flangey guitars. Yeah. And of course, it sounded nice on that. All right, so we see Michael Pierce on. This is sorting a crazy AAF from DaVinci Resolve. All right, so we see from Hoy Boy officials says, hi Greg, greetings from San Gabriel. My mother-in-law lives not far from there in Pasadena. I'm on a Mac and can't get the video window to hide when Cubase isn't the active application. How can I change this? All right, so let me just import video track. All right, so let's
cultural attraction.
okay, so I'll come over here. Let's go over to my web browser. All right. So it seems like it's hiding for me, so I had the video up here. And then when I Alt or Command Tab over to web browser or Command Tab over to Activation Library Manager, that it seems like that's kind of hiding as expected. So let me know if I'm doing something differently than you are with that. All right, we see Michael Teams is giving the Button Man 1 gallon of peppermint mocha ice cream. All right, wonderful. See Peter from Montreal. Hope you're well. Hope you're enjoying your Herman Miller chair. It's working out for you. All right, so we see from Peter, says, I'd like to record a single note on a MIDI track and assign a CC value to it so that it might trigger an event. So generally CC values, for the most part, for like 99.99% of MIDI. So let's say if we add a MIDI track here, all right, and we'll just create a note here. So let's say we're going to put a single note at measure 7. All right, and let's say if we go to our modulation, and I put in a modulation event. All right, so we do that. So, you know, the MIDI CC event isn't necessarily, unless it's going to be an MPE, a MIDI like 2.0 MPE type of device, this, is the MIDI CC is not actually tied to the MIDI note message. So the MIDI note message will have the down velocity, the pitch, the length, and the release velocity. That's what's part of a MIDI note message. Now, if we come over and choose to now we can double click on notes if the device that you're trying to trigger will respond to MPE. Then if we activate this icon here, we could double click on a note and draw in a CC value on a note, but this is pretty rare. So for most of the time, MIDI CCs aren't going to be associated in a particular note, but if it's something that's going to respond to MIDI multi-polyphonic expression, which is kind of pioneered by Steinberg, then we can just double click and go into the note expression editor and be able to enter in the particular value right here. So, and then if we want it, like as we are drawing in our single value, you can see what the range is here on the bottom right hand side. So we say, okay, I need that to be CC1 at 108. You could just simply draw that in right there. So let me know, but if you could let me know like what you're trying to trigger, and if that's going to respond. But generally MIDI notes and CCs are kind of independent of each other. All right, so we have UK Leonardo Sants. Hi, Greg. F2 is not calling up transport. Is not calling transport calling. Could it be deactivated by default? Can you help, please? So, generally it's going to be the keyboard shortcut. By default, you could always go to your settings, go to your Cubase menu to key commands. If you click here and then hit F2, you could see what particular function is assigned to the key. So we see, so if you wanted to open up the transport bar, so I think I reassigned that. So let's say transport panel. I'm just going to search. So we can say open, close transport panel. I will click here and we'll assign F2. All right, so now when I do that, my transport panel shows up. Now, if you're on Mac OS sometimes likes to take your F1 through your F2, F3, your function keys and reassign them. It's kind of annoying for functions within the operating system. So if you're on Mac OS, you may have to go into your keyboard settings. See if you can just type in function keys. And then you'll see a setting for use F1, F2 keys as standard function keys. So make sure to check that setting if you're on Mac OS. So by default, like your Windows may just automatically minimize and close, but check that at the OS level. All right, Sable Winters just mentioning, I've just heard that CDs are coming back strong. I'll post about it on LinkedIn today. Look forward to reading the post. I still like CDs. I'm glad that my car still has a CD player. All right, we have Raw Justice Hip Hop checking in from Capitol Heights, Maryland. All right, Philip Goff just says thank you. This is Peter. It says my initial post was a bit vague. I apologize. No problem. Just yeah, if you have any more clarifications, I could try to help. All right, so Bratman Studio just says, hey Greg, how's the new guitar plugin? Absolute 7, pretty realistic. So yeah, I think if you're doing like metal stuff, it's pretty killer for that. I haven't dived into it too much. I was pretty sick over the weekend, so kind of recovering. I have an orchestra concert coming up I'm preparing for, but let's take a look at it. So this is the Axe Machina or Machina, however you want. As long as you own it, you can pronounce it however you want. So, fun to... So I haven't really had a chance to dive into it. So let's say, let's see if we just put it in repeat mode. So let's say if we put on strum. So I haven't had a chance to really kind of dive into it, but I kind of watched the videos on it. Thought it sounded really cool for kind of a metal guitar vibe. So you're not going to sound like Tommy Emmanuel with it. All right, we have Tiago joining from Brazil. All right, we see Peter just says you'll get around to send me a description. Yeah, so yeah, send if you have more info on what you need to be triggered to, you can send it to me at Club Cubase at steinberg.de. All right, let's see if we have any more questions. All right, Tiago saying hi to Michael Teams. All right, let's see if there's more questions. So Friday will be the last live stream of the month. So we will do our Zoom social meetup starting around 2 hours into the live stream. So on the East Coast time, that's 3 p.m. on Central European time. That would be, I think, 9 p.m. So it's always a wonderful way to kind of meet other people that are on the live stream. And looking forward to catching up. I know we missed it because I got stuck, or I was doing a seminar the last time, and where we were going to do it, I got delayed because of travel delays. But I'm done traveling for a bit. So we'll see if there's more questions. So look forward to seeing everyone on Friday, meeting some new people. Always fascinating conversations. All right, give it our minute, see if more questions pop in. See Peter just saying rest in peace to Herb Trowick. a Pensado. So, yeah, I saw Jean-Marie Horvat posted that on Facebook earlier today. So Deemster78 says, follow-up question to the remix question. Are the steps you shown finding and adjusting the tempo and event possible to throw in a macro, you think? I'm totally new to macros. Probably not, because you have to kind of select different elements. And sometimes the macros, when you are executing, they could go by really fast, and you may have to wait for, like, other steps may be executing while it's still doing the tempo detection. So it's really like a, 4 or 5 step process, but I don't think it could be macroized per se. All right, Sables says she'll definitely be on a Zoom. Looking forward to seeing you and hearing about the Grammys. All right, Drazi Eternal just says, how do I change the nuance of violins to make them sound real? So a lot of it is going to be, so let's say if we come over here, let's just add a quick instrument. If you kind of think like a violinist, it's like when people are trying to do brass, one thing that I would always tell people to do is like, okay, actually sing the brass part and see if you could play that in one breath, but think about how someone's going to use a bow. But there's lots of great things that you could do. So let's say if we go to like Iconica Sketch and we want our violin to sound realistic, come over here. So let's say, all right, so when we do this, there's going to be all sorts of different articulations that are going to be available. So I come over here, so some of the articulations will allow you to kind of get, the dynamics on different ways. So like some of the staccato and pizzicato will be velocity. So if I hit it very soft or very loud. So if I do the same with pizzicato, and spiccato will have kind of the same. But when we get into like some of the legato and sustain, you may actually use the modulation wheel. Because like a violinist will kind of dig into the bow, string players will dig into their bow to get more dynamics. So you use the modulation wheel. So, so different articulations will lend themselves to controlling the dynamics in more realistic ways. So just like, for sustain and kind of longer held notes, try adjusting the mod wheel and get the dynamics that way. All right. All right, so we see the Buttman says he'll make it Friday in a reasonable time. Look forward to seeing you. Been too long. All right, let's see if there's any more last minute questions. If not, we'll wrap up a couple minutes early. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. I hope that everyone's learned a new tip or trick. And if you have, make sure you hit the like button and that you subscribe to the channel. All right, so we have another question here. Is there a way to automate the pitch wheel? So when you record, so let's say if I come here, all you have to do is just record it as MIDI data. So if I come, I could just say, okay, I want to so I'm gonna just record on this particular track. And I'm gonna move my pitch bend wheel. All right, and now when we play this back, and we can see that we've recorded pitch bend information. It'd be incredibly annoying musically. And then it's just recorded as it's not technically a MIDI CC, but a MIDI system common message, but it's recorded as MIDI data that will be seen directly in the MIDI editor. Okay. All right, so I think we are out of questions. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. And we will see everyone on Friday and look forward to. All right, so our question just came in. Is Iconica Sketch free with Halley and Sonic or not? Is it the only full orchestra library by Steinberg? Iconica Sketch comes with Cubase, and Steinberg offers kind of Iconica Opus, which is a combination. And we can think of Iconica Sketch as a scaled down version of the larger Iconica Opus, which is a combination of two different instruments, the Iconica sections and players, and the Iconica ensembles. So there's also a Halley Symphonic Orchestra, but if you have Cubase, you get Iconica Sketch free with that, since Cubase 13, I think, or 14. So it's not free with Halley and Sonic, but it is part of your Cubase license. So if you haven't installed and downloaded it yet, it's definitely worth getting. All right. So I think we might be out of questions now. So once again, thanks for all the great questions. Look forward to seeing and meeting new people on Friday's Club Cubase's social Zoom meetup. And we'll see everyone back on Friday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. Thanks for all the great questions, and everyone please stay safe and healthy. Goodbye.